It's Paul Joseph Watson in for Alex Jones, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ed Martin. He's the president of Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum. Mr. Martin was elected chairman of the Missouri Republican Party in January 2013, and the website is eagleforum.org. Ed, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Paul Joseph. Great to be with you.
Now, you wrote this Breitbart piece back now a couple of weeks ago with Roger Stone, how the GOP insiders plan to steal the nod from Trump. It remains to be seen whether Trump can get this magic number of delegates, 1,237. We've also got this Rule 40B with the convention, which requires a nominee have the majority of delegates from at least 8 states. If Trump doesn't achieve that delegate number, which it looks like, it's going to be a struggle, just outline for the listeners the process by which the GOP establishment is going to try and steal this from him at a brokered convention.
Yeah, well, listen, and this is very important. I know everybody's focused on the races that are upcoming on Tuesday and the week after and the week after. But as you look towards Cleveland, you've got to figure out what the playbook is that has been used in the past and how it can be used again. And so there's a couple of key points. Number one is when you get to the convention, if you're a delegate, you first have to go before the Credentials Committee. And in the past, one of the ways to block conservatives from being seated, or actually just anyone, is to use a Credentials Committee. The Credentials Committee is made up of 56 times 2. That's 50 states plus 6 territories who are all considered members of the RNC. They each get 2 members. Now, think of this. Guam gets 2 members on the Credentials Committee, and so does California. Texas gets 2, and so does Northern Marianas Island. Now, you say to yourself, that's crazy. Those 6 little territories are going to have an outsized influence, and they tend to be influenced by, wait for it, the establishment. And so here's the thing. You're going to have a vote on credentials first to see how you seat the delegates. And, for example, what if Rubio drops out next week after he doesn't do well on Florida? Rubio's delegates are supposed to vote for Rubio on the pledged first round. What if some of the Rubio delegates start announcing we're going to vote for Cruz or we're going to vote for somebody else? They could not be seated. They could be blocked from being seated for being outwardly against the candidate they're pledged to. Now, that's just one choke point. The next choke point is the Rules Committee. Same drill, 56 states times 2, 112 members. And they're going to be setting the rules for the convention. People don't realize this. The day before the convention, all of the rules under which they are currently operating expire, and they must be ruled again. They must be voted on again. Now, so think about this. If you called the RNC right now and said, I'm Joe Blow, I want to run for president, how do I get nominated? They would point you to Rule 40. They wouldn't tell you that Rule 40 expires the day before the convention, but it does. And so, we have another choke point where a rules committee made up of generally more establishment-leaning delegates will make a decision about what the rules can be. And here's an example. Current Rule 40 says you must have a majority of permanently seated delegates, that's a credentials fight, of at least 8 states. But that rule expires. What if they put in a rule that says you have to have the support of any delegate? Well, there are only a handful of free agent delegates, so-called super delegates. But what if one of those delegates stood up and said, I'm for Paul Ryan, and he can be nominated? I mean, this is the kind of hijinks that's going to go on if people aren't aware of it and ready to fight back and kind of engage fully.
And that delegate count, the majority of delegates from at least 8 states, that can be amended to any number. And this has happened before. They used it to get Ron Paul out of the way. That's correct, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So that delegate, they could decide it's 5 before. So this is a good example. The Ron Paul listeners will remember in Tampa, when they got to the Tampa convention, the Rules Committee met. And the Romney boys came in. The guy's name is Ben Ginsberg. And he said, let's change that to a majority of 8 states from a plurality of 5 states. That was meant to block Ron Paul from being put into nomination. They didn't even want him to speak. And my point is that they're going to be a group that are going to be establishment leaning, that are going to pass rules like that. And remember, one of the key things on rules, motions and rules, is that whoever acts first owns the framework of the debate. I don't know if you've seen this much, Paul Joseph. We get to a meeting, and whoever makes the first motion tends to frame the way the argument goes. So we, conservatives and anti-establishment folks have to understand we've got to have people that frame the debate and own the, why should it be that Paul Ryan should be eligible to be nominated? I mean, that's outrageous, but that's what they're floating. And so we've got to figure out how to be an aggressive on the front end of that. And I think that's the first part. By the way, the nuclear option, and I don't know if this was talked about. I know Roger Stone and I wrote a column a few weeks ago. The nuclear option that's out there, it'll take the party down to the ground, but I believe that the establishment will ultimately do it, is to decide that no delegates are bound. You see, until 1976, delegates were not bound except by the pressure of politics. And in 1976, Gerald Ford was afraid that the delegates who were going to the convention were being persuaded by Reagan, and so they made them bound. By 1979, they unbound them. And there's an argument that could be made that delegates are free to vote their conscience. Imagine if they get to the convention And there's a big hullabaloo over the fact that Democrats voted in our primaries and people are swaying our election with outside money, and we should let the delegates vote their conscience. If they do that, they'll all vote their conscience, and I think they'll steal the nomination. I think those are the kinds of options that could happen.
Now, I wanted to ask you about Mitt Romney because, of course, a few weeks ago, he appeared out of nowhere. He started attacking Donald Trump. He gave this ridiculous speech, which basically fell flat on its face. It looked like it completely backlashed against him. But there were rumors a few weeks ago that he would enter the race, even at this late stage, just to try and take it away from Trump. Do you think he still will, at this stage, enter the race at any point?
Well, no, listen, I mean, there are only a handful of candidates who are nationally vetted that would be sort of able to run for president. I mean, you know, the fact is that you have to have gone through the meat grinder at a high level to be able to do this, you know, in terms of your background and vetting. And a few of them are names we know. You know, Ron Paul is one, Rick Perry is one, Scott Walker is one, certainly Romney is one. I think Romney, though, eliminated himself from any future political career of any kind. I mean, I think his speech was so dumb. I mean, the good news is the establishment is not only greedy and lazy, they're dumb. I mean, it was a dumb speech. If he had wanted to hurt Trump, he should have, you know, given a speech that was less dramatic and more sort of, the old saw is you eat an elephant one bite at a time. You know, you don't eat an elephant all at once. And what I think Romney did there was self-indulgent and selfish and silly. But whoever put him up to it and allowed him to do it eliminated him. He will not be the nominee. There's no chance. His career is over. His political life is ended. And, you know, I think we can eliminate him. So now we're back down to only if the establishment goes to the outside. They've got Paul Ryan. They've got Scott Walker. They've got a few others. And but I think Mitt Romney's career is over. It was so poorly done and so silly. And so, I mean, it really was a kind of a hateful kind of conduct to do that in the way he did it. And, of course, by the time he was finished speaking, they were showing the clip of Romney saying nice things about Trump and how he appreciated his great success, and it just made Romney look like a fool.
Now, this brokered convention, if they pick someone over Trump, if they use it to oust Trump, if they handpick a GOP establishment candidate, aren't vast numbers of Trump supporters going to protest against that by not voting for him? Isn't this just handing the election to Hillary Clinton?
Of course. But I recall well a Wall Street financier quoted, anonymously, of course, who said, "We'll take Hillary or Jeb. We just can't have anybody, like Rand or anybody who's totally outside the norm." I mean, as I've said to people for a year, I was in the RNC. I was on the team. I saw it up close. The fact is that they have about 10 ways that they can force a guy like Trump. They can beat him. And they've done this to Cruz, too, but certainly Trump. And they've tried about 7 of them, and the 7 haven't worked. And it's really annoying to the establishment. They can't believe it. Usually when you make a gaffe like Trump made, they're able to force the press covers it and you get eliminated. And, this is the Fred Thompson or whoever, think about these guys that were flashes in the pan and went away. In this case, Trump is hanging in there. But they have 10 ways, and they haven't tried 8, 9, and 10. And, 9 is to steal it at the convention, and 10 is to take the party down. And they will not give up. This is an old-fashioned racket. They're running a racket, the guys in power. It's money, it's power, it's prestige, and they will lose their life and their lifestyle if the racket is broken up. So before they allow that to happen, they will take down the party, and they will let Hillary or Bernie or anybody else win. They don't care about the country or the party. They care about their own racket, and that's what they'll do. And so I think, people need to be aware. Don't be surprised. The other thing I'll tell you, Paul Joseph, I think people don't understand is they won't try to announce that they're taking the nomination away. They will start what I call dumpster fires. They'll have a fight in the platform committee over marriage and over international policy. And then they'll have a fight in rules over the future of the Republican Party and the convention. And then in the credentials, they'll have a fight over, whether we should honor the people who had 1 or 2 delegates. They'll start a series of dumpster fires to create so much anger and hate and resentment amongst the candidates and the proponents of the candidates, the delegates for them, that they'll shoot for what I call the 1880 solution. In 1880, three guys came to the Republican convention, and they hated each other by the time the 34 ballots were over so much. They just hated each other. There was fist fights and all that they went outside the convention to nominate someone. So the danger is not just that someone else steals it. It's that people get distracted by other fights and other chaos and other, the advertisement of riot gear. They're now saying if the Trump people are disenfranchised, there'll be riots. This is all meant to create acrimony and chaos to try to cause problems.
Okay, we're coming up on the break now, but Ed Martin will stay with us. I also want to get into these threats against Trump, as I mentioned earlier. We had another celebrity joke about Trump's assassination. We know that he's been targeted. We've got people now being deported, basically, for direct threats against Trump. We'll get into that after the break with Ed Martin, eagleforum.org. Stay with us. We are back on the Alex Jones Show. I'm Paul Joseph Watson, in for Alex, and I'm talking to Ed Martin. He's the president of Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum. It's eagleforum.org. Now, Ed, let's just say that, Trump gets the delegates, or he comes out on top of this brokered convention. According to the polls, Trump trails Hillary in a hypothetical runoff by around 6 points at this stage. Cruz is slightly ahead of her. Rubio's 4 points ahead of her. First of all, what explains that deficit when it comes to Trump versus Clinton? And what tactics must Trump adopt to defeat Hillary if he becomes the nominee?
Well, I often tell people that Phyllis Schlafly, the organization that I head in her career, she's always been involved in politics and Republican Party politics. She just thinks, often you'll hear Phyllis give a speech, she'll say politics is where the action is. And Phyllis Schlafly lost twice for Congress, and I lost a race for Congress and a race for Attorney General in Missouri, where I live. And you learn a lot when you run a race. One of the things you learn is that the primary is very different than the general, and especially you get defined after the primary is over, and you define yourself and your opponent. And here's what I would say. At this point, 4 years ago, we would have had Mitt Romney, and people would have been saying things like Obama's a failed president and Mitt Romney's a very, honest guy, or whatever, how you phrase it. I mean, now he's shown himself to be sort of, I think, very uncharitable is a nice way to say it, and not very good for us. But they defined him immediately after the primary as a greedy oligarch and a heartless guy and all this stuff. And the media participated with the Democrats. So I often caution people, Marco Rubio, to me, he would be easily defined by the media and the Democrats as very light and sort of an empty suit, and they would make fun of him and they'd make him kind of look like a lightweight. I think that's just the political fact of life. He can give nice speeches and be charming and all. And I think Ted Cruz and Donald Trump will face a similar challenge. The difference is Donald Trump is known 100% almost nationwide. He's defined as a sort of leading businessman and a kind of the apprentice guy. And Ted Cruz, even though he's more well-known, is mostly well-known by Republicans. I suspect Ted Cruz would be defined as a hard right, nasty guy is what they would do to him. And I think those numbers would change. I just go by what I know from politics. Right now, we have to look at how hard it is to win the election in America for a Republican. You have to thread the Electoral College needle, in large part because Ted Kennedy and the Democrats have transformed the country by illegal immigration and growing dependency of voters on government. But we have to thread the needle. And I think one of the strengths of Trump is that he is attracting a whole bunch of folks. I know them. I grew up in New Jersey. I know a whole bunch of guys that are cops and work in New York. They like Trump, and he's growing now. I think there's an attraction. And don't get me wrong. I think Cruz can also attract some of them. But I think Trump is, those numbers, I don't buy them. And I think, look, Hillary's the best candidate we can face because she is so well known as a corrupt, unpleasant person. And she's also captive to Wall Street and the big interests and the multinational. I do think the one missing story, and I didn't get to listen to the whole show today, the missing story that's not yet permeated into the general consciousness is these globalists who are meeting off the shores of Georgia. Phyllis Schlafly wrote about the Bilderberg. She used the Bilderberg term the first time in the 1960s. She wrote about it. But they started this in the 50s, 57, 56. It's globalists who want to subvert the nation to an internationalist vision. And it's destroying the world and certainly destroying America. And that's another part of what's at stake.
Now, I talked about this earlier on the show, but I wanted to ask you about it. There's this huge fissure now within the conservative movement, especially in terms of media, over Donald Trump. We've got Glenn Beck lashing out at Matt Drudge because he put up a photoshopped image of Marco Rubio. On the other hand, we've got websites like Breitbart, which have seen their traffic spike since they, semi-endorsed Trump, even though they say they haven't. While The Blaze, Glenn Beck's website, of course, he has endorsed Ted Cruz. That has been plummeting. Do you understand the concerns expressed by some on the right that Trump is, not a true conservative? Or do you think they're making a huge mistake and that people like Glenn Beck are just acting out of their own vindictiveness, basically?
Well, I think that every election is a choice, and every election is at the heart of it. You have to make a choice, and you look at someone and what they stand for. What Phyllis Schlafly has said about Donald Trump is that before he was running, all the candidates wanted to talk about tax cuts and the military and different things, and Trump drove the point to trade and how the international trade deals are destroying America and how damaging they are, and immigration, how illegal immigration and immigration legally is transforming the country. Without Donald Trump, I don't believe that the candidates would be talking like that. And I think it's a little bit like the 1970s, late 1970s. Ronald Reagan was certainly a great conservative.
Okay, stick on that thought. We'll be back after the break with Ed Martin. Stay tuned. It's Paul Joseph Watson in for Alex Jones, and we're talking to Ed Martin of eagleforum.org. Just got cut off by the break there, Ed, but you're getting into this fissure within the media, particularly the conservative media, the debate of whether Donald Trump is a true conservative. Just finalize your comments on that.
Yeah, real quickly. Thank you. I think, I'm often hearkening back to Ronald Reagan when Phyllis and others talk about Reagan. People weren't worried about some of Reagan's positions because Nancy Reagan, rest her soul, was a liberal and, pretty liberal lady. And Reagan ended up doing some liberal things. But on the big question, in 1978, 79, people knew Reagan understood that communism was evil and the Soviets were the enemy. And he was a strong, macho, charismatic guy, and he carried the day. Well, I would submit to you today that there's only a few candidates, and Ted Cruz is one who's done pretty good, and Trump is one that's led the way on the fundamental issue of whether America will be a sovereign nation. That is our trade deals, illegal immigration. Trump has led the way. And I think on some of the other issues, I'd like to know for sure where he'll be. But I think on judges, for example, when he talks about Clarence Thomas as a model, Clarence Thomas is one of my favorite people in public life. I think that's good. Right? So, but on the big question, I think it's a big, it's kind of a starting point. And so the media can't stand it, by the way. And the reason the media can't stand it is because the media and the multinationalist, globalist corporations have to have these trade deals to make their money, and they have to have illegal immigration and open borders. And they have to resist it, and that's why they're all fading. I mean, even Fox News is lacking in credibility, not even, but certainly more day by day because of their being in the tank for the globalist vision of open borders and trade deals that gut America. So I think the definition of conservative is someone who puts the Americans first, not the globalists or Wall Street or anything else. And if you put Americans first, you're going to address the first threat, and the first threat is these huge losses of sovereignty.
Now, another issue I wanted to delve into, because this is something that I cover on a weekly basis now, these threats against Trump. We know that Trump now wears a bulletproof vest to most of his events. He's under Secret Service protection. We had reports that, Al Chapo was targeting him. Every single day on Twitter, you have these death threats. There was an Egyptian guy who basically just had to agree to be deported because of a direct death threat he made to Trump on Facebook. We've got frothing from the liberals about how they're going to leave America if Trump becomes president. Completely unhinged, maniacal reaction. We've got these crazies crashing Trump events every time he gives a speech. I mean, I'm concerned for Donald Trump's safety, not as some part of dark conspiracy where the GOP establishment would take him out, but just the sheer amount of crazies and the vitriol being directed against him. Are you concerned for Donald Trump's safety?
I would say I'm concerned for Trump's safety and for Cruz's too, and for a number of these guys. But I want to point to the culprit here. The culprit is a leftist culture that has decided that whether it's Black Lives Matter, or I'm from St. Louis, and we had Ferguson. It was a totally trumped up, engineered effort by Soros-funded groups. I mean, what they're doing is they're conditioning people to recognize their frustration and then to act in terrible ways. And I really think that this is a danger. And again, this is more where say more information is better and all. But I think we're starting to see when we find out that there's a real problem. So yeah, sure. I mean, I'm concerned about violence in ways that I don't think we've ever expected. What's not true is that Trump is creating the violence, or that Cruz is creating the violence, or that somehow the speeches and the talks. That's not true. What is true is the culture and American life has become coarser, but that's a leftist move. And I think we have to be careful. There, again, I think I said earlier in the program, one of the things that the left will do when they're losing is divert attention through violence and rioting and killings and things like that. And sometimes they just use them when they occur. There's no doubt that this kid in Ferguson was killed. He died, and then they used the situation to say something absolutely different from the truth. But yeah, I'm very worried about it. And I think most people, I ran for office as head of a party here. Most people that observe politics have seen the edge tick up. And this is where I think Obama is he's not an honest man. Obama has been a terrible part of degrading how we live and encouraging people to be so frustrated and shrill and to think that violence is an appropriate way to feel. It's terrible stuff.
Well, I mean, we had, Time Magazine and others after Ferguson come out and write articles called In Defense of Looting. We've got, Black Lives Matter people chanting, what do we want, dead cops, while they're marching in New York City. We've got the ideological guru who the three founders of Black Lives Matter ascribe the whole movement to, being Assata Shakur, who is a convicted cop killer on the FBI's most wanted domestic terrorist list. So, you know, we had Ishmael Brinsley in New York killing the two NYPD officers as part of a Black Lives Matter revenge attack. There are these kind of people out there. And yeah, as you said, they're blaming it on Trump, claiming he's racist and bigoted when he's got more than double the support from Muslims in America than any other GOP candidate. In fact, all of them put together more than double. He's set to break records for black support. So while this racist, bigoted narrative seems to fester on the surface, there's no real depth to it, is there?
No, and look, this is they want to distract from anything but what is really happening. What is really happening in this country is a lot of people, I think it's more than a majority, we're going to see over the next 6 months, are wakening up to the fact not only that the government is corrupt and that the people in power in both parties are running a racket. And people know that, but they're waking up to the fact that these internationalist efforts, corporate and otherwise, are really degrading what is America and what is our nation and who we are. So the people are waking up to that. Now, they're going to distract with violence, and I agree with you, and it's a false thing, but the press and the media won't cover it because Donald Trump is not winning because he's charming or because of stakes or Trump University. He's winning because he's speaking directly to what I would call a dramatic change in American culture, way of living, specifically the trade deals and immigration. Nobody in this country, I mean, when he said, I want to pause on all Muslim immigrants, I didn't meet a person that thought that sounded out of control or inappropriate. Now, I know a bunch of people. I'm not saying there are many liberals, but I know some. The media covered that like it was insulting. You know, I did an exit poll in one of the early states. Something like 90% of all Republicans agreed with the idea of banning Muslims. Now, that's not what Trump, I think, said, but my point is only that they're so out of touch. And what they're trying to do is stoke up violence and anger when what's really happening is people, I think, are getting empowered. And I think that's what we have to have. And by the way, it has to extend to Congress, and it has to extend to the courts. I mean, we need everybody to get back into the understanding of what we're supposed to be about, not what they want to become and want to be kings of. You know, I find the Supreme Court, these people think they're in charge of the world. They have a role in our system. And so I think people are awakening, and I think that's why you're seeing so much energy.
Okay, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. Ed, just tell people how they can get involved with Eagle Forum.
Yeah, well, the first way is eagleforum.org. You can visit our site and read about Phyllis's career and her writings. She's a prolific writer. She's 91 years old and has been active in politics for 71 years. But people can also email me directly at ed@eagleforum.org. That's ed, E-D, @eagleforum.org. I'd love to connect them with our work and what we're doing. And thank you for the chance to be on this afternoon.
Okay, there goes Ed Martin, eagleforum.org. Thanks for joining us, Ed. And we're going to move on now to more news before we hit another InfoWars message to Bernie Sanders supporters. We've got that coming up. But this was a top story on Infowars.com this morning. Top Danish imam admits agenda for Muslims to conquer Europe. Again, this is not me saying it. It's not Alex Jones saying it. Undercover footage broadcast by a Danish TV station shows Mohammed Food al-Barazi, the head imam of the Mosque of Islamic Union in Denmark, which of course has taken in a lot of these Muslim migrants from the Middle East and North Africa, admitting that the goal of the migrant influx is for Muslims to conquer Europe. So he basically said, quote, right now we are in a time when we are opening these countries. They spoke to Islamic experts, Professors Tina Magard and Professor Thomas Hoffman, who agreed that the Islamist understanding of the word open means to conquer. The imam also basically said that Muslims arriving in the West shouldn't be expected, in fact, shouldn't full stop, integrate into Western society. Quote, when I came to this country 23 years ago, we were only 55,000 Muslims. Now we are 300,000. Hence, the conclusion of this talk is that it's possible to live in this country without melting in. You must understand the conditions without melting into society. So this top imam in Denmark with this undercover footage basically admits that, yes, this wave of Muslim migrants is to conquer Europe. And in fact, if you look in the Quran, and it's quoted in this article, the concept of hijrah or jihad by emigration is celebrated in the Quran. So it's no surprise to see these top imams calling for exactly that, calling for Muslims to emigrate to the West to spread the religion of Islam. Now, of course, got no problem with them having their own religious beliefs. It's when they're imposed on others that it becomes a problem. That is the heart of Islamism. We've previously featured a video, which is in this article, from another imam who gave a speech at a mosque in Jerusalem, basically said, Europe is decrepit, they have no fertility, we need to go to Europe, we can conquer Europe by breeding them out. Again, not me saying that, not Alex Jones, one of the top imams in Jerusalem. And it's no surprise that, you know, they're being welcomed in, given what Green Party politician Stephanie von Berg said in front of the German parliament. And we featured this quote before because it's absolutely shocking. She said, quote, "Our society will change. Our city will be radically changed. I hold that in 20, 30 years, there will no longer be German majority in our city. I want to make it very clear, especially towards those right-wingers, this is a good thing." So she's basically saying that Muslim migrants will become a majority in German cities. They will replace the native German population, and that is a good thing, which is unsurprising. The consequence of that, this is out of AFP, rising fortunes of right-wing populists in Europe. A wave of right-wing populism has swept across Europe in recent months as the continent struggles with its biggest refugee crisis since World War II. Now, the problem here, of course, is that many of these populist parties, which have been growing in support for the past couple of years now, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, but some of them are actually fascist parties. So again, the point I've made over and over again, classical liberals' refusal to stand up for liberal beliefs has created this vacuum where they're not being represented. Their concerns aren't being represented. Their voices are being censored simply for expressing concern about the pace of this migrant invasion. That vacuum has created a space where extremists have flooded in. So now you're getting extremist parties being elected in Europe, and that's going to be a problem going forward. We're going to go to this video now. InfoWars message to Bernie Sanders supporters: the establishment knows what's at stake. Do you? Here's the clip.
I was thinking about something today, and that's why I impromptu decided to shoot this special report. In every culture that was seen as somewhat manly or chivalrous, I don't care if it was in Africa or in ancient Europe, Japan, Asia, you name it, Latin America, before it was colonized by the Spanish and controlled and run by the Aztecs and Mayan culture before it. In every one of those cultures, they had war drums. They let you know from sometimes 20 miles away that they were coming. And then they would set up their army and wait for your army, your tribe, to come down and meet them. It was not war by stealth, because it was seen that cowards did that. Entering into the 20th century and the bombers of World War II and Korea, there were air raid sirens. When the radar picked up the planes coming, the air raid sirens would kick on. They would crank up with that horrible wailing noise to warn everyone to get into bomb shelters, many stories underground. But still, millions in Europe and in the UK unfortunately ended up dying just in World War II, much of it from the bombs. But still, the planes were coming, and the people knew they were coming, and they knew who the enemy was. In the 21st century, the Pentagon admits that it's all about silent weapons for quiet wars. 90% of war, they admit, is info war. Their twisted propaganda. Our information is truth, history, common sense, and chivalry, countering the deceptive fraud that is the New World Order that has captured our nation. But stealth war, breaking up the family, brainwashing the public, selling our jobs out overseas, shutting down our power plants is all part of this program. But most importantly, according to Dr. Nick Begich and many other insider experts we've interviewed and the documents, is chemicals in the food and the water and the food chain that are designed to lower our body's normal responses. Male testosterone, on average, by the time you're 40 years old, is about half what it should be. Look at the studies for yourself. Some of them show it's even lower. Many 40-year-old men have the testosterone of an 80-year-old man, and that's just one hormone. Women have way too much estrogen, so do men, because it's in the food. Estrogen mimickers, the sterols, it's all over the place. It's in printer ink. It's in the lining of plastics. It's in the lining of the money. We are being poisoned. Our fertility is being targeted, and it's dropping across the Western world. And as soon as third world countries adopt our industrial system, their populations start going down as well. This is a plan. Now, whether you want to have children or not, whether you like being infertile or not, the issue is that's just one of the side effects. Lower stamina, libido, energy. You look at the diet of people 50 years ago in the United States, it was chicken fried steak and pie, and it was incredible, but people were skinnier. Why are they so fat today? Well, a lot of studies show that things like aspartame in the diet drinks actually make you fat. They're excitotoxics, they make you hungry. The point is, we're being artificially manipulated. We're being artificially chemicalized so that we're docile and servile. They don't want men being men. They don't want women being women. They want this stealth attack through the food, through the water, through the establishment medications that are filled with things that lower human potential. That's why InfoWars has developed, with top researchers, top chemists, top scientists, top doctors, things like Anthroplex. Ladies and gentlemen, Anthroplex is the newest edition at InfoWarsLife.com. Read the facts for yourself at InfoWarsLife.com. See the informational videos and find out why the compounds in here are absolutely designed and are on record to be some of the best shots we've got at countering and blocking the globalist operations. They do not want us to be aware of what's happening to our hormones. I go back to about 5 years ago, and I had been an athlete. I had been able to lift incredible amounts of weight when I was younger naturally. I weighed 180 pounds. I could squat 600 pounds, bench press 350 pounds. I could run 6 miles and not even be breathing heavy. I was in incredible shape because my hormones were still high. Then as I got older, I was still exercising, but still eating like a pig, and I just got fat, unhealthy, and suddenly had no energy. For about 15 years, didn't really exercise other than hiking. Then I started talking to medical doctors and others, and they said, well, let's test your blood. Well, your testosterone isn't what it should be. Don't worry, most men are like that now. And I said, why? And they said, things in the environment, bisphenol A. I mean, this is known. This is in the news. And so I began to look into natural things I could do to help have my body function, at least partially, the way it was supposed to be. So let's be clear. I've only started taking Super Male Vitality 3 years ago, and Anthroplex about 6 months before it came out, because we were already developing it and already had the test bottles. And it supercharged me to the next level, coupled with Super Male. The way Dr. Group describes it is, it's the foundation to all of this. But what was so amazing is that I used to swim a couple days a week, 2 miles. I was a big swimmer in high school. I used to win blue ribbons in Dallas and stuff citywide. I was a good swimmer. And I had big muscles, but I wouldn't lose fat. I would start jogging 2-3 miles again, lifting weights, high repetitions, wasn't losing weight. I mean, I gained over 100 pounds when I was just sitting around for 15 years, so I did lose about 15 or 20, but I just couldn't get the rest off. As soon as I began to take Super Male Vitality, and now especially Anthroplex with it, because I'd already lost another 60 pounds. Now, since I've been on this just a few months, it is pouring off. Now, I'm not sure what it's going to do for you, but regardless, when you buy it at InfoWarsLife.com, you're supporting this news operation that promotes human liberty and freedom worldwide. We're anti-war, pro-life, pro-human, anti-GMO, pro-Second Amendment, pro-family, pro-private property. We're libertarians. And we sell products. We're not like NPR begging for money or MSNBC who gets $3 billion in stimulus money and gives Rachel Maddow raises with it. Then she criticizes us selling books and videos and non-GMO seeds and nutraceuticals. We're selling stuff that we believe and have researched counters the globalist soft kill operations to stun us, to take our male vitality away. We ask why past generations stood up against tyranny, but we seem to lay down to it. We ask why folks seem like they're in a trance. It's television, it's the food, it's our hormones, it's all of it. So I literally, just 10 minutes before we taped this, decided to do this because I haven't done this in a while. We took photos a year ago and then about 6 months ago, and the weight loss is dramatic already from what happened before. But I want to explain something to you. I swim maybe a half mile every couple of weeks now, not 2 miles every couple of days. I lift weights less. I jog and hike less. I still eat what I was eating before. But because whatever's going on in my body is set the way it's supposed to be, I'm like my ancestors. I can eat like a pig and not even exercise that much, and I have lost now almost 80 pounds. You can go back over the videos the last 5 years where it was 15 pounds and then 20 pounds and 30 pounds. But now, only in 2016, the end of 2015, has it accelerated. So again, am I a beach body? No. Am I Tarzan? No. Am I, some Olympic swimmer? No. The point is, I'm a big guy. I got big muscles. I've always been strong. And I've got that in-between body size. What's it called? You've got the 3 different body sizes? Yeah, but I'm the middle size, so I can gain muscle really fast, you name it. But it's hard for me to lose weight. But it has just come off of me. And soon there'll be nothing left. Again, I'm not Mr. Beachbody. I don't have all the answers. I don't claim I'm Mr. Sexy. The point is, compare this to some photos we'll show of me 5 years ago. And again, I started working out 5 years ago and was swimming 2 miles every other day. I lived on Lake Travis. I would swim across the lake and back in the morning. I would jog 3-4 miles. I had a personal trainer. I would do hot yoga. And it didn't lose the weight. People said, look, it's what's going on in your body. You've got the hormones of a 60-year-old man. Well, natural compounds that God created that are in Anthroplex and Super Male Vitality changed it. So look, I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder. I'm trying to get in shape and be strong for my kids. I'm trying to lose this weight and the brown depot fat I've got that makes you have heart attacks. I got more energy. I feel more crazy than when I was 20. And undoubtedly, what's been added to the equation is the products at InfoWarsLife.com. So that's what it comes down to. I've seen dramatic results. And quite frankly, people said, yeah, you work out less than you used to. What if you busted ass again? Boy, we'll really sell a lot of this, because let me tell you, it's working for me big time. Read the reviews, InfoWarsLife.com, and just try Super Male, just try Super Female, just try Anthroplex, try the other products, and see how good they work for you. Oxy powder, a higher level of oxygen that releases in the upper and lower intestine. I haven't talked to anybody that hasn't worked for spectacular. Deuce running the camera right now, he lost, was it 11, 12 pounds in 1 week?
12 pounds the first time.
And he's not a fat guy. That was just crap in his gut sitting there rotten. I mean, I'm just telling you, these are real products. Look, we want to sell you good stuff that works so you keep buying it anyways. But the point is, this is stuff that counters the globalist and funds the info war. That's why I'm so excited about it. I want to thank you for continuing to support the info war. Alex Jones signing off for InfoWarsLife.com. If you're watching this transmission, you know damn well you're the resistance. We believe in win-win, folks, treating people like we want to be treated. That's why we develop nutraceuticals with Dr. Group and other top researchers, chemists, scientists, you name it. He's one of our advisors to come up with products like Anthroplex that is an original product that he made just for us. And this is a base system to make super male or super female vitality work even better. It is natural. It just helps get your body pumping and going in the way you need to be going. And Dr. Group is here till we go to break to tell us about the latest product at InfoWarsLife.com, Anthroplex, that out of the gates, and we do this all the time with a new product, we discount it out of the gates to get you to try it, knowing that you're going to love it. It'll sell out. So InfoWarsLife.com, Anthroplex, 15% off and free shipping for the next 2 days only when you get it with super male or female vitality. Let's go to Dr. Group. Why do you call this the foundation to start the fire, and then the super male takes you to the next level?
Well, we just look at the base problem that's going on right now in all over the world, which is the endocrine disrupting chemicals, the amount of estrogen that men have, the femininity of men, and what's going on even in children right now with low testosterone levels, low sperm count levels, and the problems that and the attack that we're seeing on the endocrine systems of both male and female. So I'm always looking for ways to boost that and to make it more effective and naturally get the body to start producing these hormones and balancing themselves. So what we decided to do was, how can we add a few other components in there that would actually boost the effectiveness of the super male vitality and at the same time address different issues that the male might have, so it would be a full approach. And one of those was zinc. And zinc is actually necessary for the production of testosterone. There's more and more studies coming out that zinc is essential for hormone balancing.
What is in the goat weed? You got one of the purest, strongest organic forms of it. What's so magic about the goat weed?
Well, the horny goat weed was given that name because years ago in India, they noticed that a certain time of the year, this weed would grow and the goats would eat it and they would just go crazy with all the female goats. So that's how it was developed. It's called epimedium. And what that's been proven to do over thousands of years is increase sexual pleasure, help balance the male hormones. It can actually be used for women as well, but it really kind of resets and brings the hormone balance, improves sperm motility, and increases testosterone levels.
So it counters the stuff they've been throwing at us. Results will vary overall. All I know is dynamite. I mean, absolutely dynamite with stamina, with the weightlifting, with the swimming. Folks, the new product is available. Anthroplex, available at InfoWarsLife.com. Dr. Group, thank you for developing this amazing product.
Thank you.
It's Paul Joseph Watson in for Alex Jones, and I'm delighted to be joined by Ed Martin. He's the president of Phyllis Schlafly's Eagle Forum. Mr. Martin was elected chairman of the Missouri Republican Party in January 2013, and the website is eagleforum.org. Ed, welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Paul Joseph. Great to be with you.
Now, you wrote this Breitbart piece back now a couple of weeks ago with Roger Stone, how the GOP insiders plan to steal the nod from Trump. It remains to be seen whether Trump can get this magic number of delegates, 1,237. We've also got this Rule 40B with the convention, which requires a nominee have the majority of delegates from at least 8 states. If Trump doesn't achieve that delegate number, which it looks like, it's going to be a struggle, just outline for the listeners the process by which the GOP establishment is going to try and steal this from him at a brokered convention.
Yeah, well, listen, and this is very important. I know everybody's focused on the races that are upcoming on Tuesday and the week after and the week after. But as you look towards Cleveland, you've got to figure out what the playbook is that has been used in the past and how it can be used again. And so there's a couple of key points. Number one is, when you get to the convention, if you're a delegate, you first have to go before the Credentials Committee. And in the past, one of the ways to block conservatives from being seated, or actually just anyone, is to use a Credentials Committee. The Credentials Committee is made up of 56 times 2. That's 50 states plus 6 territories who are all considered members of the RNC. They each get 2 members. Now, think of this. Guam gets 2 members on the Credentials Committee, and so does California. Texas gets 2, and so does Northern Marianas Island. Now, you say to yourself, that's crazy. Those 6 little territories are going to have an outsized influence, and they tend to be influenced by, wait for it, the establishment. And so here's the thing. You're going to have a vote on credentials first to see how you seat the delegates. And, for example, what if Rubio drops out next week after he doesn't do well on Florida? Rubio's delegates are supposed to vote for Rubio on the pledged first round. What if some of the Rubio delegates start announcing we're going to vote for Cruz or we're going to vote for somebody else? They could not be seated. They could be blocked from being seated for being outwardly against the candidate they're pledged to. That's just one choke point. The next choke point is the Rules Committee. Same drill, 56 states times 2, 112 members. And they're going to be setting the rules for the convention. People don't realize this. The day before the convention, all of the rules under which they are currently operating expire, and they must be ruled again. They must be voted on again. Now, so think about this. If you called the RNC right now and said, I'm Joe Blow, I want to run for president, how do I get nominated? They would point you to Rule 40. They wouldn't tell you that Rule 40 expires the day before the convention, but it does. And so, we have another choke point where a rules committee made up of generally more establishment-leaning delegates will make a decision about what the rules can be. And here's an example. Current Rule 40 says you must have a majority of permanently seated delegates, that's a credentials fight, of at least 8 states. But that rule expires. What if they put in a rule that says you have to have the support of any delegate? Well, there are only a handful of free agent delegates, so-called super delegates. But what if one of those delegates stood up and said, I'm for Paul Ryan, and he can be nominated? I mean, this is the kind of hijinks that's going to go on if people aren't aware of it and ready to fight back and kind of engage fully.
And that delegate count, the majority of delegates from at least 8 states, that can be amended to any number. And this has happened before. They used it to get Ron Paul out of the way. That's correct, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So that delegate, they could decide it's 5 before. So this is a good example. The Ron Paul listeners will remember in Tampa, when they got to the Tampa convention, the Rules Committee met. And the Romney boys came in. The guy's name is Ben Ginsberg. And he said, let's change that to a majority of 8 states from a plurality of 5 states. That was meant to block Ron Paul from being put into nomination. They didn't even want him to speak. And my point is that they're going to be a group that are going to be establishment leaning, that are going to pass rules like that. And remember, one of the key things on rules, motions and rules, is that whoever acts first owns the framework of the debate. I don't know if you've seen this much, Joseph. We get to a meeting, and whoever makes the first motion tends to frame the way the argument goes. So we, conservatives and anti-establishment folks have to understand we've got to have people that frame the debate and own why should it be that Paul Ryan should be eligible to be nominated? I mean, that's outrageous, but that's what they're floating. And so we've got to figure out how to be an aggressive on the front end of that. And I think that's the first part. By the way, the nuclear option, and I don't know if this was talked about. I know Roger Stone and I wrote a column a few weeks ago. The nuclear option that's out there, it'll take the party down to the ground, but I believe that the establishment will ultimately do it, is to decide that no delegates are bound. You see, until 1976, delegates were not bound except by the pressure of politics. And in 1976, Gerald Ford was afraid that the delegates who were going to the convention were being persuaded by Reagan, and so they made them bound. By 1979, they unbound them. And there's an argument that could be made that delegates are free to vote their conscience. Imagine if they get to the convention and there's a big hullabaloo over the fact that Democrats voted in our primaries and people are swaying our election with outside money, and we should let the delegates vote their conscience. If they do that, they'll all vote their conscience, and I think they'll steal the nomination. I think those are the kinds of options that could happen.
Now, I wanted to ask you about Mitt Romney because, of course, a few weeks ago, he appeared out of nowhere. He started attacking Donald Trump. He gave this ridiculous speech, which basically fell flat on its face. It looked like it completely backlashed against him. But there were rumors a few weeks ago that he would enter the race.